Cadillac's V series of performance cars hit a stride a couple of years ago with two models, the ATS-V and the CTS-V. Now the ATS-V competed against things like the BMW M3 and M4, where the CTS-V targeted things like the BMW M5. Now Cadillac decided that formula wasn't working for whatever reason, even though I've liked those two cars very much. They've decided to come out with two new sedans that don't really replace directly the ATS-V and CTS-V. I've covered the CT5 in a separate video. That goes after new cars like the Mercedes C-Class and BMW 3 Series. Now I'm driving the smaller of the two, the Cadillac CT4, in its V trim to see what that one is all about. Now this car targets a smaller class of sedans like the Mercedes A-Class and CLA class and the BMW 2 Series Gran Coupe. Does it do that? That's what we're going to find out today by checking out what the 2020 Cadillac CT4-V is all about. So let's start off by checking out the exterior of the Cadillac CT4-V. Now this is based on GM's Alpha platform, just like the old ATS was, but this is not a direct replacement for the ATS. This is more positioned against subcompacts like the Audi A3 and S3, BMW 2 Series Gran Coupe, and Mercedes A-Class and CLA. It's actually 5 inches longer overall than the old ATS, but it actually has the same exact wheelbase as the old ATS. So interesting positioning there. They've positioned the CT5 as sort of a 3 Series rival that's a little bit bigger, sort of in between a 3 Series and a 5 Series. So that's where you have to keep this in mind in your head. It's 2 Series Gran Coupe size, but a little bit bigger. So looking at the front, it looks very similar to its larger CT5 sibling. The biggest difference that you're going to notice is these taillights. They are connected and they kind of come down onto the grille. It's kind of a unique light signature that I haven't seen before. I really like the mesh grille that you get on the V model, especially in this black. It gives it a very aggressive sort of hitman sort of look. I also kind of like this blue, although they have some more exciting colors. They have a really nice vibrant red and a really cool orange as well on this car. We've got the base 18-inch wheels, which I think look a little basic. I'm usually all for small wheels, and I used to love how the ATS-V came on 18-inch wheels, but I think I would probably opt for the 19s here. We have, of course, got our V logo here. That's going to rub some people the wrong way, because of course this car is the performance variant of the CT4, but it is not quite as high performance as the old ATS-V. There is going to be a CT4-V Blackwing engine that is rumored to get the same engine that you used to get on the ATS-V, that being a 3.6 liter twin turbo V6 with 464 horsepower. We have another V logo back here with our Cadillac badge. We have CT4 over here, and this one is an all-wheel drive model. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I think this vehicle suffers from the same issue that I had with the 2 Series Gran Coupe, and that is it is a very awkward rear end. There's just a lot of space here, just kind of awkwardly here on this trunk lid. It is a kind of weird looking back end, although I don't think it's ugly. I think it's a pretty decent looking car, although a bit generic from the side. So now let's hop onto the interior of the CT4-V, where we're probably not going to spend too much time here because the interior of the CT4-V is not the most impressive place to be in terms of materials. Now remember, this is an entry-level Cadillac model of the CT4, so you really have to compare this to things like the Mercedes A-Class and CLA class, the BMW 2 Series Gran Coupe, Audi A3, Lexus UX, things like that. And when you look at those models don't exactly exude the same level of luxury as some of the models higher up in their range, so I have to keep that in mind and give Cadillac a pass for some of these materials here. We do have some nice things, like we have this V steering wheel with this cool V button that I'll talk about a little bit later, with some very nice metallic paddle shifters as well. We also have cool V gauges, although those are going to go away in the 2021 model year and get replaced with a all digital display. I look forward to seeing that. But some of like the door cards and stuff, we do have like sort of soft touch materials, but they're not super premium. A lot of the buttons and switches really feel kind of like they belong in like a premium Chevrolet product, maybe not necessarily a Cadillac product, maybe even like a Buick product. The stocks are a little bit cheap. Like I just hopped out of the 2021 Cadillac Escalade, which just elevated Cadillac to such a really nice premium level that hopping into now the bottom range range of their interior is just a little bit meh in terms of materials. I do like how the climate controls are laid out though. We have these nice metallic buttons here. We've got some buttons underneath it. We have a very low optioned car here. So you can get ventilated seats with massage. Actually, it's not a very good massage, but you can get massage on here. We just have heated seats. I want to talk about the seats too. I do not like them at all. They do not have enough bolstering for me. It is adjustable, but when I try and tighten it up, it feels a little bit too tight. So I have to open it up, and then the seat just feels a little bit flat to me. So I wish it kind of had like more of like a Recaro like the old ATS-V had. Maybe when the Blackwing model comes out, that's going to be the performance model above the CT4-V. Maybe when that comes out, it'll have a little bit more aggressive seat, but I think most people will be fine with this. I have to mention the infotainment screen. It's an 8-inch touchscreen. This is the only screen you can get on this model. It looks tiny, and I think that's mainly because of all of this bezeling around the edges of it, these big black bezels. The screen is actually fine. It's pretty high resolution, although there is a lot of glare on it. It has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Next model year, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay will be wireless, but not on this 2020 model. We also have a very nice 14-speaker Bose stereo system, and that comes standard, although you do have to opt for navigation, and you do have to opt for a lot of the safety stuff. We have a very small safety package. I think it's like $800, gets me blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, but you still have to opt for things like adaptive cruise control and other features like that. And aside from the touchscreen, you can also control it via, you have a volume knob here, and then you have kind of this scroller here, which I don't really know why you would use that instead of just reaching for the touchscreen. You also have this sort of BMW style controller here that you can use. That's kind of handy if maybe you don't want to get fingerprints. And then you have a secondary volume knob. I don't know, kind of interesting there as well. Now let's talk about the CarBuzz cup holder index, because this car is actually going to score very well there. We've got two cup holders here. They're not super spectacular in terms of how they grip, but they do fit my Yeti just fine. But this car scores exceptionally well when it comes to other places to put your stuff. We have a large area here that is perfect for a phone. It also doubles as a wireless charger. We also have this really nice slot here by the center armrest that is perfect for a phone. The phone fits in right there, and it also has a way that you can wire it into a USB port here, so you can charge your phone via connected if you need to plug in for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So I really love how there's multiple places to put your phone, so you don't have to take up a cup holder. So in that context, I'm going to give the CT4-V a 4 out of 5. Now, I mentioned earlier that this shares the platform with the outgoing Cadillac ATS, so the rear legroom is exactly the same, 33.4 inches, which is fine for the segment, although you do get more in some rivals like the BMW 2 Series Gran Coupe and Mercedes CLA, so not a huge amount of space back here. The seats aren't particularly comfortable either. We do at least have some air vents, so that's nice, and we do have cup holders here on the center armrest. Now remember, the CT4 is competing with a very small class of subcompact luxury sedans, so you don't get a ton of trunk space here. 10.7 cubic feet of space, which is less than what you're going to get from the Mercedes-Benz CLA, and it's much less than you get from the class-leading BMW 2 Series Gran Coupe. You can fold the rear seats down to get a little bit more space, but you're not going to get anything massive in here. You might want to opt for the Cadillac CT4 if you're doing some cargo hauling. Now, I must admit, viewers, I'm coming into driving the CT4-V with some very lofty expectations for how this car is going to drive, because the old ATS-V, and I know this is not a direct replacement, but the old ATS-V is one of the best cars I've ever driven. The coupe with the manual, oh my gosh, that car was simply fantastic. So let's start off by mentioning what you get on the base CT4, because you might be interested in the non-V model. Like most cars in this category, you get a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It actually produces really good numbers, 273 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque. That goes out to an 8-speed automatic transmission. You can get rear or all-wheel drive on that model. Now, there is an optional engine on the CT4, which is actually the engine that we have here, a 2.7-liter 4-cylinder engine. They call it the dual volute turbo engine. I don't know where they got that name from. Interesting. It produces produces really good numbers, 309 horsepower and 348 pound-feet of torque, and you get a 10-speed automatic transmission. And again, that can go through rear or all-wheel drive. Now, if you opt for the V model, you still get that 2.7 liter, which if that engine sounds familiar, it's because you can also get it in the Chevy Silverado. But what they do is they tune it a bit, so it now produces 325 horsepower and 380 pound-feet of torque. That's more than what you'll get from a Mercedes A35 or CLA 35. It's also more than you'll get from a BMW M235i or a Audi S3. And it does some pretty good numbers. You can get all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. We happen to have the all-wheel drive. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And it gets you a pretty good 0 to 60 number, 4.8 seconds with rear-wheel drive or 4.9 seconds, a little bit slower with this all-wheel drive setup. So let's go ahead and see what it'll do with some acceleration. I'm just going to brake torque it here. Ooh. Wow, that is quick. This GM 10-speed automatic rips shifts. Oh my gosh, it's real quick, real snappy. I love this 10-speed automatic transmission. When you plant your foot, it goes into a performance shift mode where the shifts become even quicker. You get some real nice, some farty noises on the exhaust when it upshifts. You get that really like the way that sounds, actually, especially at full tilt, just like I liked how the CT5 with the twin-turbo V6 engine sounded. Now, this engine is a little rough. It's a truck engine, after all. It sounds a little rough when you're just kind of driving it normally, so let's give it not full, but just a little bit acceleration. You see, it's a little rough, but it definitely makes a good growl. I will say, it is not easy to make a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine sound good, and I wouldn't call this amazing, but I think it's definitely at least one of the best turbo 4-cylinder engines that I've heard in terms of throatiness and exhaust. Now, you do get a lot when you opt for the V. The V model is the performance variant of this car. It's not going to be the highest performing variant. There's going to be another one coming later under the Blackwing name that's a little better. But you get a V performance chassis with magnetic ride control 4.0. That's GM's adaptive suspension option. You also get a limited slip differential. That's going to make this car a far more efficient handler than a regular CT4. I love GM's magnetic ride control. They do a great job of absorbing bumps when you have it in like the tour mode, the comfort mode, and then they get really stiff and prevent body roll when you put it in track mode. There's just one problem. This car doesn't have it. For whatever reason, when you get all-wheel drive on the CT4-V, you lose the magnetic ride control dampers, you get some ZF passive dampers, and you lose the limited slip differential. I don't know why you would ever opt for an all-wheel drive CT4-V. If you want an all-wheel drive CT4, just get this engine on the regular CT4, get all-wheel drive, skip the V, unless you just really want the power and the looks associated with the V. But I think you're really losing what this car was made for if you're getting it with all-wheel drive. You save yourself $1,100 too. That's my little top tip, and you'll be a tenth quicker to 60 miles an hour. Now, you do get some other stuff as part of the V as well. You get Brembo front brakes with 4-piston fixed calipers. That's good to help this car stop a little bit quicker. You get the performance instrument cluster that I showed you when we were pulled over. You also get this handy V button. I really like this V button. So I mentioned the drive modes. We've got our little drive mode selector here, just like we did on the CT5. Tour mode is your default. You also have a My mode where you can configure everything. You also have a sport mode, takes things up a little bit more, a little more aggressive. You have track mode and then a snow and ice as well. Now, track mode, as you heard, I had it in track mode when we did that launch, makes everything feel a little bit tighter, quickens up the shifts, all that. The steering, this is an Alpha platform car, and if you don't know, the Alpha platform is a General Motors platform that underpins a lot of vehicles. It underpinned the old ATS-V and CTS-V. It currently underpins the Camaro. Every vehicle that's ever been based on this platform drives extremely well, and this is no exception. I'm taking this through a turn fast. I have so much balance through the steering. The all-wheel drive drive grip is actually quite nice as well. I just love the way this vehicle steers and drives. It's very Camaro-like in that aspect. Now you also have this V button that I've mentioned now a couple of times. Now if I push the V button, it's going to go into a default mode that I've set up. So I've set it up so it's basically the same as track mode. Unfortunately, since we don't have the adaptive suspension, there are fewer parameters that I can adjust on this mode. But when I put it in V, everything gets aggressive. It's quick. This car does put a smile on my face. Now, you'll notice that I'm not shifting it by myself with the paddles. I'm letting the car do it automatically. This 10-speed is so good, I prefer leaving it to its own devices. I do not like paddle shifting it manually because I feel like I miss shifts. You have to hit it right before red line or else it will bog and you won't get the quickest shift. So I like leaving it in that performance shift mode. Works just fine for me. It's really great. The ride quality is fine. I seem to remember the old ATS-V being more comfortable than this. Maybe that's because it had magnetic ride control. Even though we only have the 18-inch wheels here. So I'm thinking if you get a rear-wheel drive car, 19-inch wheels, because I mentioned I think the 18s on this look rather basic. With magnetic ride control, I think the ride will be more comfortable, but with this passive suspension, this car is not that comfortable. So this is a really nice driving sports sedan. I already love it way more than the 2 Series Gran Coupe. I felt that car just did not handle very well. I haven't driven the new Mercedes CLA yet, but I definitely think this feels more sporty than something like an Audi S3, and that's because even though this one that I'm driving is all-wheel drive, it is a rear-wheel drive platform. I'm really looking forward to the improvements that they're going to make next year for 2021. This will also get Super Cruise, so it'll have hands-free self-driving, that digital gauge cluster. I think that'll really help it. But in terms of being the most fun car that you can buy in this sort of subcompact segment, I think the CT4-V might be a winner. I think this might be the most fun car that you can buy in the segment, and it's also one of the cheapest. So that was the 2020 Cadillac CT4-V. Now, where does this car stack up? Well, it really kind of depends on your outlook, really. Do you want the best driving subcompact luxury sports sedan? I think this might be it. I do like how this drives way more than the BMW 2 Series Gran Coupe, and it just feels a lot more dynamic and driver focused than an Audi product with its front wheel drive layout. I love the fact that Cadillac kept this vehicle rear wheel drive. In terms of luxury, it doesn't fare so well. I think the interior feels more like a Chevrolet or a Buick than a Cadillac, of course this being an entry-level model, although I do think next year the improvements of having a digital gauge cluster and Super Cruise will help this feel a little bit more premium. Now, the price. It starts at just under $45,000, which might kind of sound like a lot. You can get a lot more value if you just want the driving experience with a Chevy Camaro and you don't need the extra doors and bigger trunk. Now, the Chevy Camaro is obviously a very different class of vehicle, so let's compare this to the BMW and the Mercedes. The last BMW M235i that I tested had a sticker price of $51,000. This CT4-V comes in well under that at around $48,000, although we definitely don't have all of the options here. Now, the Mercedes A35 and CLA 35 are much more expensive. If you go to load those up, you can actually get them over $70,000 with enough options. So in terms of value, the CT4-V has a very good proposition, and in terms of how it drives, it might be the best dynamic vehicle in the class. So if those things appeal to you, maybe the CT4-V should be on your shopping list. I really hope you've enjoyed this video of the 2020 Cadillac CT4-V. For more videos like it, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos. Also check us out on the CarBuzz app on iOS and Android, and the CarBuzz website as well. That's where all of our content usually lives. We also have content on other social media channels, including Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, where we have short little videos of cars just like this one. I'll see you next time.